They sent me an email yesterday and asked if I'd come on for a few minutes.
Okay, we are live now. So 1 second. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. That is Mike Fuji up top. I am Al Norfleet, and together we are at the 50 with Fuji and Fleet. How are you, Mike?
Good, sir. Training camp underway. Mr. Hall of Famer Ray Didinger joining us. Ray, welcome to At the 50 with Fuji and Fleet. It's an honor once again to be chopping it up, talking shop with you. How are you tonight?
Doing very well. Nice to be with you, fellas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Same with you. Mike and I was both saying, man, we are so nervous right now. So, well, look who we're talking to. Okay. I want to start out with going back to when it was a Sunday when you had your farewell on WIP, and you had stated that the fans help you live your dream. Tell us a little bit about that.
Very true. I started out as a fan myself. I think most people at this point know that I'm a native Philadelphian, that I was born and raised here. Grew up following the Phillies, following the Eagles. Sports fan from the time I could walk, and just found myself doing exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, from the time I was really young. I mean, by the time in high school, I really had made up my mind I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to work for a newspaper. And best of all possible worlds would be to be writing sports and covering the Eagles and the Phillies and all that. I mean, these were thoughts that I had, back in 62, 63, when I was still in high school, just thinking, well, that's kind of my dream job. And there aren't all that many people that I know that can actually say that they spent their life in their dream job. I mean, we all have dream jobs, and it's a very, very small percentage of people that actually get to live that. But I did. So, one of the things that I tried to say when I was retiring, and I hope I said it in a way that people understood I meant it, was I really feel lucky that I was able to spend my life doing something I love so much. I love the city. I followed these teams. I love writing. I came to love the broadcasting part of it. And I was able to spend my whole life doing exactly what it was I wanted to do. So I feel very fortunate about that.
Mike?
Ray, who were some of your influences to get you into journalism? Is there anybody specifically that you looked up to, or you just?
Oh, sure. There was a writer at the Philadelphia Bulletin, for those that still remember the Philadelphia Bulletin.
Yes, sir.
That we got the Philadelphia Bulletin delivered to our house every day. And there's a sports columnist there named Sandy Grady, who I started reading when I was, even before high school. The paper got delivered every afternoon. First thing I did was I ripped the sports section out and started reading it. And I always started by reading Sandy. And I just thought that he was such a great writer and did such a great job of telling a story and making you feel as the reader that you were right there, that you were right there in the Phillies clubhouse. You were right there in the Eagles locker room. He had that ability to paint that picture. And so he became my first sort of writing idol. Later on, years later, 1969, when I got hired by the Philadelphia Bulletin, I wound up getting the desk next to Sandy Grady. They hired me and brought me in as the high school writer. And the sports editor walked me over and he said, "This is your desk." And it was the desk next to Sandy Grady, who was the guy who was my idol. So it was a little bit like a guy being called up from the minor leagues and given the locker next to Ruth or Gehrig. I mean, it was really that kind of feeling. And just another example of how many things really were kind of fortunate in my life, that not only did I get a job in the business, but I got a job at the paper that I grew up reading, sitting next to the guy that I idolized. I mean, just my whole life story is really kind of a whole lot of those things that all just very serendipitously all kind of fit together.
Well, I mean, you talk about Sandy Grady, my mistake. But then, Tommy McDonald being your boyhood idol, you wrote the play Tommy and Me. That's
right.
Pretty phenomenal, just a resume just to have, sitting next to your idol and then, meeting, not only that, introducing Tommy McDonald in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another one. That was another one. I mean, Tommy was my hero. Going to the Eagles games with my parents and my grandparents, watching them win the championship in 1960, watching Tommy every week just make one big play after another. He was my hero, no question. And the way things worked back in those days, Eagles training camp, it wasn't like today. Eagles training camp was up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, on an open field next to the high school stadium. And anybody could just drive right up and park and go out and stand on the field, stand with the players and watch practice. And so for a kid like me, the opportunity to meet these guys and to meet your hero was very real. I mean, they were that accessible to you. And, Tommy sort of befriended me, and we became really good friends to the point where he started calling me little brother. And I would carry his helmet to the practice field every day, and we would sit outside the dormitory and talk, and we developed a really nice relationship. And then years later, when I became a sports writer and a Hall of Fame voter, I found myself in a position where I could actually begin to try and mount an effort to get him in the Hall of Fame, to try and kind of give him the thing that he had always wanted, which was enshrinement at the Hall of Fame. And then when it did finally happen in 1998, he asked me to be his presenter. So, I mean, you can tell me, what are the odds of that kind of story really happening? That you go from being the kid who carries his helmet, your boyhood hero, you help him get in the Hall of Fame, he asks you to be his presenter, and the two of you are riding together in an open convertible through the streets of Canton. I mean, that's really fairy tale stuff, but it really happened for me.
Right.
Now, I was going to cover this a little bit later, but since it's up, can you tell me, from the first time you carry his helmet to the time that you introduced him into the Hall of Fame, what was the feeling? Can you compare those two feelings?
Well, they're different, obviously, because for the one, I'm 9 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at this through the eyes of a 9-year-old, just being there with my boyhood hero, and he's actually talking to me, and I'm actually carrying his helmet. I mean, that was just a little kid's kind of thrill. That was a Christmas morning kind of thrill. The later on one, when we're both grown up, and we're standing together on the steps of the Hall of Fame, that was different. That was the one was just pure excitement, a little kid's excitement. The other one was a different kind of feeling, because it was a different kind of emotion. And I guess the biggest difference is in the helmet thing, he's giving something to me.
Right.
And at Canton, he felt like I had given something to him. That my efforts had helped to put him in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So it was, in that respect, I mean, it really is kind of a full circle kind of thing. It's and I think that's part of the reason why the play, when I wrote the play, and the first time we did it actually was 2015, if you can believe it. and that's one of the reasons why it's still going on. People keep coming back to see it year after year after year, because it's just such a remarkable story, and a story that just makes you feel good. You don't have to be a football fan, you don't have to be an Eagles fan, you don't have to be any kind of a fan to understand a good story when you see one. And this is a really good story. And I know, Dick Vermeil's come to see it 3 times. He likes it. He likes it that much. And we're going to get to do it again in January. We just signed a contract a couple weeks ago to do the play at the People's Light Theater out in Malvern. So this will be, I think, the 7th different theater that we've done the play in since we first first staged it in 2015. So it's just a beautiful story that that just people still love it. And one of the things that I really feel good about is that Tommy lived to see it. Tommy he was there when we first put it on, and he and his family got to see it, and he really enjoyed it. And now, even though Tommy's gone, his family, his kids and his grandchildren, they come back every year to see it all over again. And I'm sure they'll all come out to Malvern, to People's Light, to see it in January. And, it's like his daughter said to me last year. She said, this play has kept Dad alive for us. And I understand that. I understand that. And it means a lot to me that it means that much to them.
Now, part 2 to that question is, I think the night when y'all was backstage of the Hall of Fame, and that's when you told him about you was that little kid,
right,
back in the days. How did he receive that?
That was the first time I had told him. I mean, we had been together throughout this whole process when I was trying to get him in the Hall of Fame, and he was up for election a couple times, didn't get it. We kept trying. So we had been doing this for about 4 or 5 years before 1998, when he finally did get in. But all that time we spent together, I never told him that I was the little kid. I was little brother, that I was the kid that carried his helmet. I never mentioned it until we got the actual day of enshrinement, the day in Canton. And you're right. We were backstage getting ready to walk on. And it was the first time I told him who I was. And his reaction was, what I remember was his reaction was he remembered it. He remembered it really well. That was what I was afraid was not going to happen. I was afraid. I was always afraid to tell him and have him say, "Oh, yeah, really? I don't remember that," which would have been, would have been a hard thing for me to swallow, because I remembered it so well. But it was quite the opposite. When I said that, I used to wait for you outside, like immediately it clicked. He said, "Well, oh, you were that kid. You were the kid that knew all the stats. You were the kid that carried my helmet." He remembered it. He remembered it as well as I remembered it, actually.
Right.
So that was another aspect that made that day so special.
Mike?
Ray, you talked, just to go back to the Bolton and the Inquirer, just to touch on working with some fellow journalists like Stan Hockman, Bill Conlon, Bill Lyon. What was your experience and your relationships with those gentlemen?
They're all, well, it's particularly in the case of Stan. I mentioned Sandy Grady earlier, was probably the biggest influence for me professionally as a kid, saying that's what I want to be. The guy that first really got me interested in being a sports writer was Sandy, but Stan was like right there too. I didn't really start reading Stan until I started going to college. I was commuting to Temple, so I was taking the Broad Street subway to and from every day. So that was the first time I really got to pick up the Daily News. I hadn't, with the bulletin we got delivered out in Delaware County. The Daily News I didn't see until we went in the city, and I started going to college, and I began picking up the Daily News every day, and I started reading Stan every day. And that was when I realized, boy, this guy is really terrific. And Stan was really kind of a pioneer in the sense that, I mean, today, sports writers, print guys, for them to jump over and do TV and radio is nothing unusual. Stan was doing it back in the 60s when nobody else was doing it. I mean, he really kind of pioneered that across different platforms, sort of journalism. I mean, his main job was being a Phillies writer and a columnist for the Daily News, but he was also doing morning radio for WCAU, and he was also the weekend sports anchor on Channel 6. So he was doing newspapers, radio, and TV, and he was great at all of it, frankly. So when I got into the business, when I got hired by the Bulletin and started covering the Eagles and doing all that kind of stuff, and I got to actually work with Stan, work alongside Stan. And then when I left the Bulletin and went to the Daily News, we were actually working for the same sports section. Yeah, that was pretty thrilling to me because he was another one of those guys I really looked up to. And you mentioned the others, Bill Conlon, one of the best baseball writers ever, no question. And Bill Lyon, one of the best columnists ever. I mean, that's one of the things that when we talk about Philadelphia, what a great sports town it is, and we talk about the fact that we have really good, really knowledgeable, really smart fans here, and I think that's true. I think part of the reason for that is because you've had so many great writers and so many great broadcasters in this town. The generations of sports fans here, they grew up reading Stan Hochman. They grew up reading Bill Lyon, Bill Conlon, Tom Cushman, Jason Stark. They grew up listening and watching on TV great broadcasters like Gene Hart and Harry Callis and Tom Brookshire and people like that. So this fan base has been well educated by the sports writers and the broadcasters in this town. I think it's one of the reasons I really do think this is a very smart sports town. And the athletes here, they say, boy, the knowledgeable fans here. And that's true. They are. But I think part of it is that because they've had such a great sports media in this town, that's done a really good job of educating the fan base.
Well, you're right. I mean, we, as diehard sports fan growing up, loving, following all four teams. We are pretty fortunate from the names you said. I know some folks may not remember Bill Campbell, Byron Som, just you said Harry Callis, just to name a few. And,
sure.
Like the writers like yourself, Stan Hochman. As a sports fan, I'm 52, and just it was great just to be a part of Philly sports when I was younger, just to witness and just all that old school knowledge of you don't see that now, which is a shame.
No, I know you're right. But we did here for a good long time. And I always thought one of the great advantages that I had, and one of the things that really helped me, is the fact I am from here. I am from Philly. I grew up with these teams. I lived this history. Whereas the other guys, and they're all great. But, Sandy Grady came from North Carolina, and Stan Hochman and Frank Dolson came from New York. And, Bill Lyon was from Illinois. And, Mark Wicker was from the Carolinas. And, all of these guys, terrific writers, but they all came from somewhere else. And they sort of had to assimilate Philadelphia. They kind of had a, if you lived in this town long enough, you kind of get a feel for the teams and the passion of the fans and everything. But I had it in my bones from the time I was a little kid, and my first trip to Connie Mack Stadium or my first trip to Franklin Field. It was a part of who I was. And I felt that kind of feeling that I had, and that kind of, I understand what this means to these fans because I grew up with them. I was one of them myself. I think really helped in my writing because on a big day, when a big thing happened, like when the Phillies finally won the World Series in '80, and the Flyers won the first of the cups, and certainly Super Bowl 52, when those big moments happened in this city. I didn't have to try and imagine what the fans were feeling. I didn't have to sit there and try. I wonder what this means to these fans. I didn't have to ask that question because I knew, because I was feeling what they were feeling. And I think that was one of the things that really helped me over the years as a writer here.
Yeah.
No, I am one of those mentioned that I'm not from the area, and I came to this area I think in '85, and since I've been here, you are one of the persons that I listen to a lot, and I learn a lot about Philadelphia sports. And I think since 2000, I have become closer to Philadelphia sports because I drive for the Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, and Flyers. So I'm always around the guys. Even your son, David, we're good friends. And I used to take them up to when they go up to New England during the playoffs, do the games up there. I was always with him. So I learned a lot from you in dealing with Philly sports. So, and like you say, it's amazing to feel what these fans are feeling. And I can definitely appreciate that. And that brings me to the point of, out of 53 years of your work has been showcased multiple platforms, newspapers, books, radio, television. And I just ordered your book a couple of days ago, and I just got it in the mail. So
Oh,
I'm
okay.
definitely going to be taking some reading from there as well. But
That's the original. That's the original Eagles Encyclopedia.
I think he has the other one.
That was the first one, and that was edition 3, the one that Mike's got.
Right.
We did the first one, the one that you have, Al. We did that. And, that came out the year after the Jacksonville Super Bowl.
Okay.
For the first one that they went and lost. That one, and then we did one about 10 years later, after I guess the first year of Chip Kelly, or maybe the second, which we called the New Eagles Encyclopedia.
Right. Yeah.
And then I kind of said, okay, guys, I think we got this covered now, unless they win the Super Bowl. Okay. I think if they win a Super Bowl, I think we kind of got to go back and come out with a third edition. Now, none of us ever knew that was going to happen, but Super Bowl 52 happened. Right. And, I contacted the folks at Temple University Press and said, I think we better do a book right now. And so we got the one that Mike had, and that was a fun book to write, because it had that last chapter that everybody was waiting for. It had the big win, and then one of the questions we had was what to put on the cover. It was such a momentous occasion. What do you put on the cover? I mean, you could have put Philly Special. You could have put, Jeff Lurie holding up the Lombardi Trophy. You could have had Foles holding up the MVP. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to go for a cover picture. But I said, I think it's the parade, because I think that when I think about that win, and I think about the Eagles winning the championship, yeah, it's about the team, and it's about the coaches, it's about the organization, but it's really all about what it's meant to the city. I think of the fans and what this meant to the generations of fans. Their joy in this was a big part of the story. It was as big a part of the story as the game itself, I thought. And so I thought we had that great picture of the parade coming down Broad Street. And I said, we'll have plenty of football pictures inside. There will be no shortage of pictures inside of football. I think the cover really needs to kind of speak to the whole Philadelphia aspect of what this game was about. And when I look back on it now, I think it was the right call. I think it's a great cover, and I think it was just perfect for the moment.
Oh, it is perfect. I mean, what more, like you said, the Philly Special, Nick Foles winning the MVP. I mean, it's just, this is what Philadelphia is about. We all love our teams, but the Eagles are the heartbeat of the city. No disrespect to anybody else, but 3 hours a week on Sundays, this town is buzzing. I mean, that whole training camp starting, it's like Christmas morning.
No question. No question. I mean, this is a great sports town. I would tell you, I think it's the best sports town in America. But they love all the teams. But the Eagles are number one. I mean, this is a football town. It just is. I mean, you look around the rest of the country. I mean, look how many Super Bowls the Patriots have won. But I don't look at Boston as a football town.
Right.
Boston is a baseball town, and New York is a baseball town. I mean, they have their football and they've won there, and the fans support it and all. But you turn on sports talk radio in those cities, and any day in the year, regardless of what time of the year it is, they're talking baseball. They really are. Even in the middle of the football season, they're talking Yankees and Red Sox. Mm-hmm. Here, you turn on the radio any one of 365 days. It doesn't matter when it is. And I guarantee you people are going to be talking about the Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely.
This really is a football town. I think Pittsburgh is much the same way. I mean, Pittsburgh, the Penguins have won and the Pirates have won, but the Steelers own Pittsburgh much the way the Eagles do here. It's funny. It's funny. Certain towns have certain sports that they identify with, and in Philadelphia, there's no question the Eagles are number one.
I was fortunate enough to be in the parade. I think I had 4 of my buses in the parade, and I mean, for me, not being a player or even a coach, I think I had just as much joy and pride riding down Broad Street, seeing nothing but a sea of humanity. And to this day, that's something I will never, ever forget. Yeah.
Anybody who was there, you'll always remember it. I mean,
absolutely.
I know I will. And I've been to all of them. I mean, I was at the first I went to the first 2 Flyers parades. Those are the first ones in the city. Nobody had done that before. The Flyers did them. I was at both of those. I was at the Phillies parade in '80, which was great. Sixers parade a couple years later with the Doc and Moses team. And they were all great. I mean, they really were. They were all great. But this one was extra special because I think it was the one kind of missing piece. You had the fans in this town, they had a chance to celebrate all those other championships. But we just finished saying, this really is a football town.
Yes.
Until they had that Lombardi Trophy moment. That's what everybody was waiting for. And when it happened, boy, it was great. And it was a great parade. And I mean, no one will ever forget Jason Kelsey on the steps of the Art Museum.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the perfect exclamation point on that whole experience. And it was, it's been a while now. It's been a couple of years, but I mean, it's still very vivid in my mind, as I know it is in yours too.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell me, what was it like for you and your son David when he came on your live broadcast and you shared that embrace together?
Yeah, that was pretty special. It is amazing that how people still ask about it, talk about it, remember it. My son he's a cameraman for NFL Films. In fact, right now he's over in Paris. He's shooting the Olympics.
Okay.
He's getting ready to shoot the opening ceremonies tomorrow.
Okay.
So he's a really good cameraman, but he was shooting that Super Bowl for NFL Films. And in fact, he shot the Nick Foles wiring. So that whole byplay between Foles and Doug Peterson about what do you want, Philly?
Right.
That was my son's shot. He got that. And when the game was over, he had told me before, he said, if the Eagles win this game, I want to find you and we're going to have a celebration together.
Right.
And so we were right in the middle of the post-game show, and my son came walking in, and Michael Barkan waved him immediately onto the set. And he and I hugged, and I started, all my emotions kind of came back and thinking about, my parents and how much I wish they had been there to see it. And You know, and I started, I got, you know, I got real emotional and I started to cry. And I felt a little, I felt a little awkward about it because I knew it was happening on live television, and I had never been, you know, I had been doing post game shows for a long time, and I'd been there for some big wins, of course, but I had always tried to keep it kind of on the professional level. You know, I
Right.
never wanted to kind of go over the top, but this day I did, and it was, and I thought, geez, there's a lot of people watching this, and here I am crying on live TV. But as it turned out, I mean, and Governor Rendell said it at the time because he was sitting right next to me.
Mhm.
He said, don't worry about that. He said, that moment you just had with your son, he said, that's happening in every living room all across Philadelphia. I mean, everybody's having the moment that you just had with your son.
Right.
They believe me, they understand. They know exactly how you're feeling, and they're right with you. And he was right. And the fact that you just brought it up, and somebody just a couple days ago just stopped me on the street here in the city and said, you know, next to the Philly special, my favorite memory of that game was you and your son. So it was one of those things that I think everybody understood because everybody was having all of those same kinds of emotions. And, you know, it was just, you know, David and I was like, you know, we put our arms around each other, but we were actually putting our arms around the entire city because everybody
Right, absolutely.
pretty much the same thing.
I can relate because my great aunt was a big diehard Eagles fan, and you know, unfortunately, she passed in 2009, and just the, not only myself like yourself, like you're saying, but family members have passed that didn't get a chance to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl.
Sure. I mean, and if you're anybody who was at the parade, I'm sure you probably saw people that literally were there with urns,
right?
The ashes of their parents or their grandparents, saying that, you know, my grandfather wanted to be here for this day and he didn't make it, but you know, I wanted to bring this, so he was here today and you know, I mean, I saw lots of that. I mean, not just one or two. I mean, I saw lots of those, and it kind of speaks to a couple of things. Number one, it kind of speaks to what we had said earlier, which is the hold that the Eagles and football have on this fan base and how real that is. That was part of it. And then the other part of it was just how desperately people wanted this to happen and how long they had waited for this to happen. I mean, and a lot of people thought it was never going to happen. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, you know, after the Eagles lost the Super Bowl in Jacksonville, said, you know, oh, you know, I've given up. I know now I'm never going to live to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl. A lot of people really felt that way. And so when Super Bowl 52, when the Eagles did win it, and especially the way they won it with a backup quarterback as underdogs, the fact that was the way it finally happened, it made the celebration, I think, even bigger than anyone could have ever imagined it would be.
Not only that, it was just, you know, beating Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, the dynasty they had.
Sure.
And it was, you know, it was like a monkey left it off the back finally, and just, you know, it was surreal. But the scary part, I just had a conversation with a friend a couple weeks ago. The last play of the game, it was like, you know, Brady threw the Hail Mary and the game was over. I actually thought there was like going to be a flag, you know, called for Gronk, and everybody just stood there like it was frozen in time. Like, is the game over or what? Like, probably the whole Eagles nation, every Eagles fan, Philly, everywhere was like,
that was how it felt. I mean, that was how it felt. The booth where we were getting ready to do the post-game show was on the mezzanine level, right behind that end zone. So that pass, all of that stuff happened right in front of us, and they easily could have called pass interference on that. But you're not going to throw a flag in that spot. No, you know, But even then, Gronkowski is very close to catching that ball. It's very, very close. I mean, but it was their day. I mean, it was the Eagles' day. And to your point about what this meant, I remember, if you remember, what the AFC Championship game that year was New England, Jacksonville. Remember?
Right.
And and Jacksonville was winning that game. Jacksonville was winning that game in the second half. And in the studio where we were getting ready to do the Eagles pregame show, all the people on the floor, all the cameramen, all the technicians, they're all rooting, saying, yeah, the Jacksonville's going to win this game. Yeah, we're going to get to play Jacksonville in the Super Bowl. It's going to be an easy game for us to, it's going to be a much easier game than the Jaguars. And I'm saying, I don't want the Jaguars. If the Eagles are going to, I want to play the Patriots. I want to play the Patriots. Because I really had a feeling the Eagles had such a special thing going that year with the whole underdog, the dog masks, all that stuff, that I felt like if they got to it's set up much better for them to play the Patriots. Because if they had gone up against Jacksonville, if it had been Jacksonville in the Super Bowl, the Eagles would have been favored, which meant they wouldn't have been the underdogs anymore.
Exactly.
And I just think right now they were on this underdog roll. Nobody believes in us. Nobody thinks we can do it. To keep that thing going, they needed to play the Patriots. If they'd been Jacksonville, it would have changed the whole dynamic.
Dynamics, yeah.
And the other part of it was, if the Eagles are finally going to win a Super Bowl, if they're finally going to win a Super Bowl, let them beat the Patriots. I didn't want, if you're an Eagles fan and, the guy who works next to you in the office is, he's a Cowboys fan, okay? Because we know they're out there.
Yes,
They're everywhere. Can't get rid of them.
You come in on Monday and after the Eagles beat the Jaguars in the Super Bowl, and you say, see, the Eagles won, my team won. And his reaction would be, big deal. You beat the Jaguars, okay? I didn't want there to be anything that took anything away from the Eagles winning this. So if we're going to win it, and I really believe they were going to win it, I want them to win it over the Patriots. And that the fact that it worked out the way it worked out, I mean, it could not have been better.
Like I said, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. I mean, it's retribution from Super Bowl 39 and beyond.
Yeah, it was the biggest passing game of Brady's career, 505 yards. Patriots had 631 yards of total offense. Never punted the entire game, and the Eagles still beat them. It was just, it was their day. It was
Wasn't that the highest total yard Super Bowl ever?
The highest, the highest total yardage ever in any game. There was total offense in that game was 1,131 yards.
Wow.
Total offense. It was the most ever in an NFL game. Preseason, regular season, postseason, doesn't matter. It was the most total offense ever in an NFL game that day. Most people don't realize that.
I did not know all that.
Most people are just so caught up in the fact that the Eagles just won it,
right?
That nobody looked at the list of records that were broken in that game in terms of offense. But bottom line, if you just go to the total yards, 1,131 total yards, most ever in an NFL game.
Okay. Now, you and a co-host, Glenn McNow, you started a long-form interview program called Tell Me Your Story.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, especially the one that says the little girl from North Philly.
Yeah, that was a real good one. It started during the pandemic. It started during the pandemic in 2020 when the whole sports world went dark for months and there were no games. And for a sports talk station, what are you going to talk about if there's no sports? So, I mean, you can only talk about, hey, what's your favorite sports memory? You can only do that so many times. So we had to try and figure out some kind of new programming to just keep us afloat until the games came back. And it was Glenn's idea. Glenn said, why don't we do something called Tell Us Your Story, and we'll just get a different sports person on every week. And for 1 hour, we'll just have them talk about their life, where they're from, how they got started, how they got up, and, all that kind of stuff. And there was a time when there was a lot of that on radio. That when you used the term long form. That's what it's called, long form interview. And it used to be that you used to get a lot of that on radio. Well, not much anymore. Everybody's into this, short attention span kind of thing. And the idea of people really going to sit and listen to 1 hour of conversation. We said, look, let's just try it and see if it works. And so we did. And what we found was people loved it. People loved it. In fact, they liked it so much that Glenn and I would do it during our show, and then they would rerun it later at night on another show. And people really liked it. And so in fact, they liked it so much that when the games did come back and sports did come back, we figured at that point, okay, that'll be the end of Tell Us Your Story. We're just going to go back to doing sports talk. And people wrote in and said, no, you are going to continue the interviews, right? I mean, they liked them that much. So we wound up doing 108 of them. 108, which is probably more than double what we thought we were going to wind up doing. We wound up doing 108 of them. And you mentioned the Dawn Staley one, which was, one of my favorites. She was hard to get because she's been so successful in South Carolina that you have to go through like multiple layers of people down there to try and, who are you? You want to talk to her about what?
Right.
But once we got to Dawn and she knew, oh, WIP Philadelphia, yeah, absolutely. She came on and did it, and she was great. She was really one of the best ones, and her recounting what her thrill was about carrying the American flag at the Olympics, which we're going to get to see tomorrow when LeBron James does it.
Right.
She was the pick of all of the American athletes, all the American captains. That's how it's done. It's a vote of the respective team captains of who's going to carry the flag, and the other captains voted for Dawn, and so she got to carry the flag into the stadium. I guess it was in Seoul, I think, and talking about, just as you said it, she said, I'm walking into this huge stadium in front of this whole contingent of U.S. athletes, the whole world watching, and I'm carrying the American flag and just thinking, how did a little girl from North Philadelphia wind up here? And, moments like that are really kind of what made Tell Us Your Story special, because we got, we interviewed a whole lot of people, and everybody had a wonderful personal story somewhere in there. And I thought Dawn's was one of the best.
Mike?
Ray, I just wanted to touch on just the Eagles, of course. When, we talk about Bill Belichick, I want to go back to 1960. The Eagles, 1960, beat the Green Bay Packers, and you were there. You beat not only Bill Belichick, but Vince Lombardi. Compared to, the phenomenal Eagles Super Bowl win, what was it like when the Eagles beat the Packers? I know they were the powerhouse back then, Vince Lombardi. What was it like just being at that game?
I'll never forget it. I was 13 years old, there with my parents and my grandparents sitting in section AA. Tickets cost $8. Thought that was a lot of money. Our seats for the regular season were $3. They went up to $8 for the championship game, which seemed like a lot. But the thing I remember was that 1960 Eagles team. Even the players on the team will tell you that they man for man, they probably weren't the best team in the league. They really weren't. But they were a team that just everything kind of broke their way that year. The quarterback, Norm Van Brocklin, had already announced during the season that this was it for him. He was retiring at the end of the season. So he really wanted to go out on top. And the guys really wanted to win it for him. And the coach, Buck Shaw, had also announced that he was retiring at the end of the season. So there was a real feeling on the part of the team that the guys on the team really wanted to win it for Van Brocklin and Buck. They wanted to send them out on top. So that was sort of the thing that drove them all year. There's no question they overachieved relative to their talent level. And then it was the story of Bednarik, at the age of 35, playing both ways. Mid-season, he was the starting center. And a mid-season starting linebacker named Bob Pellegrini broke his leg, and they only had a rookie backup. And the coach didn't trust the rookie, and he went to Bednarik and said, "Chuck, could you go both ways?" And Bednarik said, "Yeah, I can do that." And so the rest of the year, Bednarik at the age of 35 played 60 minutes. And it isn't just that he played 60 minutes. He played great football. And of course, the play that everybody remembers is the middle of the season in a huge game up at Yankee Stadium. Eagles-Giants, who were battling it out for first place in the East, play a game up at Yankee Stadium. And that's the game when Bednarik puts the big hit on Frank Gifford, forces the fumble that the Eagles recover to win that game up in New York that sends him to the championship. So it isn't just a matter that Bednarik played 60 minutes. It's that over the course of that season, he made so many big plays. And in the championship game, he knocked out Paul Hornung in the first half. And then at the end of the game, he makes the tackle. He makes the tackle on Jim Taylor to save the game at the 7-yard line. Pretty amazing accomplishment. You go back over that game, you go break down the play-by-play. There were 142 plays in that game, and Bednarik played 139 of them at the age of 35. It's, Bednarik was a legendary figure before that, but I think his legend went up to yet another level with that season and in particular that game.
That hit Concrete Charlie put on Frank Gifford. Was that the game he broke his leg in?
No. He gave Frank a concussion.
Right.
That Frank knocked him completely out.
Right.
They carried Frank off the field unconscious,
right.
And Frank did not come back until 1962. I mean, he was not only out for the rest of that year, he was out for all of 61, and then came back in 1962 and resumed his career for a couple more years. But yeah, the Bednarik on Gifford hit is still considered one of the, NFL Films some years ago did the 100 greatest tackles in NFL history. And they picked that as the number one tackle in NFL history was Bednarik on Gifford, because the thinking was it was a Hall of Famer hitting another Hall of Famer, knocking him out for a year and a half, and also forcing a turnover that allowed the Eagles to go on and win a world championship. I mean, you kind of had all of your elements right there.
So I always remember Concrete Charlie was questioned about that picture, him like taunting Frank Gifford, but he basically said this game is over.
That was correct. And that photograph, the photograph of Chuck celebrating over Frank, which was shot by a photographer named John Zimmerman for Sports Illustrated, got that picture. And over the course of his life, Chuck must have signed that picture 50,000 times. Every time I went to a card show or an Eagles reunion or something, most of the guys were just signing headshots, your classic headshots, and Chuck always had the picture of him over Frank Gifford.
Right.
And so I wish I had $1 for every one of those that he signed, because I saw him sign thousands.
Wow.
Okay, Ray. Let's get on to the 2024 Eagles. What do you think will be the biggest battle in camp?
probably they're probably just sorting out the secondary, because you have a lot of players back there and a lot of new players, and just figuring out for defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, figure out who's going to play and where are they going to play. I mean, that's really kind of the thing they have to figure out. I mean, the offensive line's in pretty good shape. I mean, they've lost Kelsey, but Jurgens will play there. The skill positions are pretty well set. Receivers are pretty well set. Barkley's going to be Barkley. I mean, he's going to be your number one running back. Quarterback's a threat. So your offense is pretty well set. And defensively, I mean, you got some issues in the front seven. You got to figure out your linebackers and stuff. But the big thing is the secondary. They have to straighten out the secondary. I mean, they gave up 35 touchdown passes last year. I mean, only one other team in the league gave up more. And they have to, and you saw, I mean, they understood that. In the offseason, the focus of the draft was that. They brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They knew that they needed better players in the second. And they've got a lot of new players. They got a lot of new faces now. But now you got to find out what they can do and how they're going to work together. But to me, that's what this training camp is going to be all about. Will be sorting out, okay, who are the guys, who are the players, and where are we going to play them?
Mike?
We have a couple comments that came in from Imani Bentley saying, "Go Birds," and they're predicting the Eagles' record of 15-2. Pretty interesting. I was going to ask you, Ray. I'm sure you've been asked this a million times over the last year, last 8-9 months. What, in your take, what was the biggest collapse of the Eagles last year?
Well, when the team collapses, the way that team collapses, it's never just one thing. I mean, it was a collective. I mean, it was the coaches, it was the players, it was everything. And I felt like I was one of the people when they were 10-1. I was one of the people, and it's a good thing I wasn't on the post-game show, because people would have been mad at me. But I would have been saying every week, they can't keep doing this. They can't keep winning games this way. There was a lot wrong with that team last year. And at 10-1, I don't want to say it was a mirage or an illusion. It wasn't that. But if you really broke it down, and you looked at the metrics within those games, and the metrics that are the most tied to wins and losses, the Eagles were way at the bottom. I mean, in a lot, especially on the defensive side. They were 27th, 28th, 29th in a lot of key categories. And I mean, a game that the Buffalo game is a good example, the game that gets them to 10-1. They're down. They fight back, they tie it, they win it in overtime, and everybody's all excited. Buffalo had 500 yards in that game. And the Eagles, give them credit. I mean, they fought back and they won it. But I mean, I remember I sent an email to Michael Barkan while the post-game show was going on. And I said, Michael, don't read this on the air and don't quote me on this, okay? Because nobody wants to hear this now. Because everybody on TV is saying, they found a way to win. And this is a team that refuses to lose. And I wrote to Michael and I said, Michael, this is not sustainable. The way they're playing these games, this is not sustainable. I said, and if they keep playing this way, the San Francisco 49ers are going to come in here next week, and they are going to kick their butts. And now, if I had said that on the air, like, nobody would have wanted to hear it.
Right.
I can't believe it. They're 10-1, and you're still finding fault. Well, I mean, if you looked inside of that, and you really broke it down, and you watched the film, and you looked at the stats, you realized there were a lot of problems there. And so, look, I thought that they were going to have trouble. I thought the 49ers were going to roll them. I really did. Given the way the 49ers were playing and the way the Eagles were playing, I thought that was going to be I thought that was going to be a bad game, and it proved to be. But now, did I think they were going to lose 6 out of 7? No. But I thought that they were, from that point on, I thought that there was a good chance they were going to struggle. Did I think they would lose at home to Arizona? No. Did I think they would lose to the Giants? No. But by the time it got down there, the thing had just so totally fallen apart. I mean, they couldn't even beat a bad team then. At that stretch, you lose the 49ers, you're losing to a good team. You lose the Cowboys, you're losing to a good team. That you kind of understood. But once it got down to the end of the season, they couldn't even beat a bad team. I mean, and so, but I thought there were a lot of things that happened in the course of getting to 10-1 that just didn't quite add up to being what you normally associate with 10-1. And so it's all stuff that they had to, and I think they knew that they had to rectify in this offseason. A lot of it was on the defense. A lot of it was in the secondary where they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't stop quarterbacks. I mean, people picking them apart. But there are also issues on the offense. I mean, and I think that, Jalen Hurts turned the ball over 20 times last year. And if you have a combination of a quarterback who's turning the ball over and a defense that can't defend against the pass, you're going to lose football games. And that's what happened to the Eagles at the end.
Yeah.
Yes. I just got another comment from Atlanta, Georgia. It says, do you think this team will get back to the team they were in recent years?
I don't want to oversimplify this, but it's largely about the quarterback. It's largely about Jalen Hurts. If he can get back to playing the kind of football he played 2 years ago, this team's capable of getting back to a Super Bowl. I really think that. But if he plays the way he played last year, no. I mean, the defense has to be better, and I think it will be better. It can't be worse.
Right.
I think the defense will be better, but I think the difference between being just kind of an okay playoff team and being a team that has a chance to maybe go back to the Super Bowl, it really revolves around the quarterback. It really revolves around how well he plays. If he can get back to playing the kind of football he played 2 years ago, then they absolutely can. But if he makes as many mistakes and has as much trouble executing the offense as he did last year, probably not. I think they have enough talent on the roster to still win the division. I still think they'll be a playoff team. And I think that right now I would make them the favorites in the East. Again, I would. But if you're talking about going beyond that, if you're talking about having a team that can go back to a Super Bowl and maybe win it, then your quarterback has to get back to playing the level he played 2 years ago. And to me, that's the big question. How well will he assimilate into this new offense, and how well will he and new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, how well will their game mesh there? Will they find the same kind of rhythm and execution that he had 2 years ago working with Shane Steichen? Can they develop that same kind of partnership? If they can, this team can go far. If it dissolves into what it dissolved into last year, then probably not.
Now, one last question for me, and this is everybody's talking about it nowadays. In your opinion, do you think there is any problems between Jalen Hurts and Coach Nick Sirianni?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they're still. I think they're still trying to dig out from the wreckage of what happened at the end of last year. I mean, the team doesn't get over something like that in one off season. I mean, you went from being the team that everybody said, "Hey, this is the best team in football." I didn't believe that, but a lot of people on the record thought that. To all of a sudden being a team that can't beat the Arizona Cardinals at home. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that all of these guys, coaches and players alike, have to kind of figure out now. And that's why I don't foresee this as being a real problem between the two of them now. But it's something that they have to work through in this training camp. I think that Sirianni has talked about, he feels like he needs to push these guys harder in training camp. They need to be a little more demanding in this training camp. And I think that's true. I think that they have to really emphasize their conditioning. I think some of the guys you had on defense, Davis and Carter in particular, ran out of gas down the stretch last year. Can't have that happen. And you build that conditioning foundation now in the summertime. And I think Sirianni has talked about, I think we need to have a tougher training camp. He's talked about that. Let's see if he does it. I think he should. And the other part of it is, I think they really have to work hard and be ready to go right from week one. I really don't like the idea that they have this Brazil thing. You know, I really don't think this team needs that at this point. But it's going to be very important for them to get off to a fast start this year, because what happened at the end of last year is still, whether they want to admit it or not, it's still in their head.
Right.
They finished last year. And the best way to put that behind them is to get off to a good start this year. If they stumble out of the blocks and they're 1-3, then the pressure on Sirianni is going to be enormous, because he's going into this season with a lot of people having him on the hot seat. And they start slow, that seat's only going to get hotter. So they need a really good preseason. They need a really good training camp and put themselves in position to get off to a good start in the regular season. If they do that, I think that they can be okay. But the start this season, I think, is very important.
Mike?
Rays, just one more question. We know we're a little over the hour limit here. Who is your Mount Rushmore of Eagles, if you can pick?
Mike, I didn't quite catch all that.
No, I said, who is your Mount Rushmore of Eagle players?
Of Eagles players? Okay, that gives me 4. Bednarik, Chuck Bednarik, 1. Steve Van Buren, the great running back from the 40s, is number 2. Reggie White, for sure. Best defensive lineman I ever saw. And number 4, boy, 4th one's a tough one. It's a tough one between it. To me, it's between Carmichael and Dawkins. I might go with Carmichael. Still, all these years later, he's still most catches, most yards, most touchdowns. Anybody that ever wore an Eagles uniform. And now finally got in the Hall of Fame. I don't know how you don't have him up there. Your all-time touchdown guy, I think he's got to be up there. If you gave me a 5th one, it would be Doc.
Right. Okay.
But I can't leave Harold off. I mean, his numbers are just too good.
I didn't mean to put you on the hot seat there.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a pleasure. It's been insightful. It's been wonderful. I appreciate your time, Mr. Didinger.
My pleasure. Always nice talking to you fellas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We appreciate you coming on and taking your time. Now that bird season's here.
My pleasure. I look forward to the season, and I hope it's a good one.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been At the 50 with Fuji and Fleet, and our special guest today, the great Ray Didinger. Thank you so much, Mr. Didinger.
Thank you.
Guys. Take care.
All right, you as well.
Go birds.
All right. All right, Mike, what do you think?
Great show.
Absolutely. We were both nervous for no reason.
Actually, we're still live.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to close it out just like that, but I enjoyed it. And I appreciate it.
Hey, the Godfather of football, chopping it up. You know, it's, a, it's an honor just to talk to him. I mean, I figured I thought of asking him who his Mount Rushmore was with Brian Dawkins' honorable mention, but
Yeah,
if you're going to ask the Mount Rushmore, your top 5 Eagles, folks, there you have it. From the
absolutely.
Godfather, Philadelphia football himself, right from the horse's mouth.
Okay, all right. Well, Mike, as always, it's a pleasure working with you.
Yes, sir. Likewise.
Get this out tonight, and hopefully, that was my daughter from Atlanta, Georgia. She was the one that asked that last question there. She's a diehard Eagles fan, but right now, I think our next schedule is August the 7th. Hopefully, we'll get something before then, but August the 7th will be Eagles inside of Dave Spadaro.
Right.
7 o'clock on Wednesday, August the 7th. So stay tuned for us, and thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Everybody have a good night, and go Birds.
Go Birds.